Hi, welcome everyone. This is Stephanie Heyer. I'm the Senior Program Officer at the Greater Kanawha Valley Foundation, and we are so happy that you've joined us today for evaluation one-on-one training. As many of you know, we set off on this journey to become a more data-driven foundation to help us measure our impact at the organizational level. We wanted to build the capacity of our partners and grantees like you all and help you measure the impact of your programs that we partner with you on. So I am happy today to introduce to you CJ Johnson. CJ is a consultant with our Midwest Evaluation and Research Partners. She completed her Master's of Science degree in Sociology from the University of Cincinnati, as well as a bachelor's degree in Business Administration from Ohio State University. She is currently a consultant for Midwest Evaluation, providing much needed expertise in strategic management and program evaluation. Prior to working with Midwest Evaluation and Research, CJ worked as a contract consultant for many organizations, including the City of Cincinnati Health Department. And we are, like I said, just really excited to have her here and presenting to you all. And I will turn it over to CJ.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all are ready to jump into the world of evaluation, and we'll go ahead and get started. So what is evaluation? Evaluation is the systematic collection of information about the activities, the characteristics, the outcomes of projects, and the services to make informed decisions about how to improve your implementation, your impact, and your effectiveness. So in this webinar, we are going to discuss the different types of evaluations that there are. We're going to talk about the different ways in which you can develop evaluation questions. We'll talk about how you should go about implementing your evaluation, how do you develop questions for surveys, how do you collect data. So we'll pretty much cover the entire gambit of evaluation in a way that you all will be able to implement these evaluation tools on your own without necessarily having to outsource it to other individuals. So evaluation as a whole assesses the value, quality, or the impact of the projects that you are doing. So the big question is, why should you evaluate? Evaluation is important because it can help you learn and improve design and implementation. It helps you to reflect and generate ideas on your program. It helps you to answer important questions about the impact of your program, how you're implementing your program, what changes you might want to make to your program to be more efficient. And so it helps you to really understand if your work is contributing to positive changes, and then to also be able to demonstrate that impact. It holds you accountable, and it strengthens funding proposals to raise resources because it gives you some data that you can build upon to say, this is exactly what my program has accomplished. This is the impact that my program has had on its participants, and this is why you should continue to fund me, or you should fund me. So evaluations can help you learn about what is working and what isn't, and it can help you make informed decisions about your program. Sometimes evaluation can be this scary word. And so I just want you all to know that evaluation should be useful. It should be relevant. It should be timely and specific. It is not, or does not have to be a pass or fail. The opportunities for learning and for improvement are in those things that you may see as negative from your evaluation, but there are actually ways in which you can change your program so that you are more efficient and more effective. And so it's not a pass or fail. It's about what was done right and what didn't go so well, and then how can we make it better. It doesn't have to be expensive or labor intensive. And we're going to show you how to implement some evaluation tools that go against those kind of fears that people have about evaluation. So in a previous webinar that we did, we focused on logic models. And some of the grantees for TGKVF have logic models and some of you don't, and that's okay. But I just wanted to demonstrate how the evaluation process is connected to your logic models. And so as you can see from this picture, there are different types of evaluations based off of where you are or what you're looking to evaluate with your program. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about those things. So like we said before, program evaluation is the systematic collection of information about the things that you are doing, and so that you can make informed decisions on how to improve your implementation, your impact, and your effectiveness. So there are three types of program evaluation. There's process evaluation, outcome evaluation, and impact evaluation, and we'll talk about all three. So process evaluation focuses on the processes and the activities involved in planning or implementing or delivering your projects. It helps you to understand the how of implementation. So how are your objectives achieved? When you normally would institute or begin or do a process evaluation during the service implementation, and they also can inform the ongoing evaluation. So some types of questions that you may look to answer when you are conducting a process evaluation would be, did we implement the program or services as we planned to? Have we been on schedule with our implementation of the project? Are the program recipients satisfied with what they received? What challenges occurred in the implementation process, and how can we address them, or how should we address them? And then you can also look at kind of the financial aspect. How were the funds used, and were they used in the way that they were planned? So process evaluation, remember, focuses on the process and the activities involved in planning, implementing, and delivering projects. The next type of program evaluation is outcome evaluation. And outcome evaluation looks at whether or not the project is meeting its short and long-term outcomes. So it helps you to understand the what happened as a result of the work that you do. And so outcome evaluations normally take place upon the completion of the activities of your program. And so you're looking at evaluation results over time to allow you to see larger trends and successes from multiple viewpoints from your project. So some example questions that you may ask for outcome evaluations is, did we meet our program or service goals? Why or why not? What changes did we see in the perceptions, the attitudes, the behaviors of the participants as a result of the work that we did? And did those behaviors of the participants serve change? So remember, outcome evaluation looks to assess whether or not the project is meeting the short and long-term outcomes. Now, impact evaluation assesses whether or not a project is meeting its intended long-term outcomes. So outcome evaluation measures the program's effects on the target population, while impact assesses the program's effectiveness in achieving its ultimate long-term goals, and it measures the long-term effects of the outcomes. So impact evaluations are normally conducted after a program is ended. It helps you to understand the overall impact of your program beyond those who participated or who were immediately served. And it's also a great way to measure or to see how a program contributes towards the larger organization's mission. And so some questions that you may ask when you're looking at a program evaluation is, what is the overall impact of the program on the larger community? In what ways does the program contribute towards the overall well-being of the participants? And then in what ways does the program contribute to advancing our organization's mission? And so the three different types of evaluations are based upon what you're looking to learn about your program. All right, so prior to the start of the webinar, you all should have received 2 case studies that we will reference throughout this webinar. The first case study was a hypothetical grantee called Kanawha Valley Parents. And it was a 16-week program whose goal was to increase school readiness and to also have 6 community events and to increase parent and child interaction. So I hope you had an opportunity to look over that information before the webinar. The second case study that we'll be referencing was West Virginia Arts Festival. And West Virginia Arts Festival was a 6-week arts educational program, and then they also had a large festival at the end of the program. And so we're going to use these 2 examples so that you can actually look to apply some of the things that we talk about in this webinar, and we'll have some polls where you'll get to do some answers. So the first question that we're going to look at is that the Kanawha Valley Parents as Partners program is interested in learning if their 16-week program is implemented according to their planned schedule. So what type of program evaluation should they employ? Would it be impact, timing, process, or outcome? And then the second question that you're going to answer, and the poll will come up shortly, is the West Virginia Arts Festival is interested in learning if their program changes participants' attitudes and behaviors. So what type of program evaluation should they employ? Aaron, if you could go ahead and put up the first poll so that people can participate. All right. Looks like we're about at 71% has voted for that one. Aaron, would you put up the other poll? And remember, the question for this poll was that the West Virginia Arts Festival is interested in learning if their program changed participants' attitudes and behaviors. All right, Aaron, if you can go back to the presentation. Okay, so for the first poll, the correct answer would be a process evaluation because they are looking to see if they implemented their program according to their planned schedule. The second question, because they are interested in learning about participants' attitudes and behaviors, then that would be an outcome evaluation. Now, to give you a better understanding of the difference in the impact and outcome, for impact evaluation for this question, they may look to examine how changes in the attitudes of participants created changes in their community as a whole. So an example of the difference between impact and outcome would be if I have an organization who is interested in increasing graduation rates among their participants, and they find through an outcome evaluation that they did so, the impact would be, did the graduation rates lead to an overall increase in average income of the community? So that way you can kind of see the difference in the types of measures or questions that you would look for in impact versus outcome. All right, so In a previous webinar, we talked all about logic models and how to create them. And so we'll start this idea of developing evaluation questions. Because the first step for program evaluation would be to create a logic model or a type of plan. And then you move to this next step, which is developing questions. So when you're looking to develop evaluation questions, the evaluation questions establish what you are trying to answer in your evaluation. What is it that you want to learn about your project? And so evaluation questions are useful to focus and provide structure to an evaluation. If I'm interested in learning if we change behaviors of individuals, then I probably shouldn't want to ask questions about processes, right? So it helps you to focus on what you are going to structure your evaluation. It guides the evaluation planning process, including choosing the right kind of evaluation that you want to conduct and your data collection methods, because the different ways in which you collect data affect the type of information that you receive for your evaluation. And then also, inform how the results will be incorporated back into planning and implementation to improve the program. So we just don't want to know how well the program is doing, but sometimes you want to know how can we do it better. And so when you have these evaluation questions, it helps to focus what your evaluation will be. So when you're developing your evaluations questions, you want to review your program's purpose and objectives. So use your program's logic model. And if you don't have a logic model, that's fine. You can look at your program's purpose and objectives. And then you want to identify the aspects of the program you want to evaluate. And that will determine if you're doing a process evaluation or if you're doing an outcome evaluation or impact evaluation. So when you're trying to figure out your evaluation questions, you may brainstorm by thinking, I would really like to know blank about this program. And that blank that you fill in will determine the path in which you take for your evaluation. So depending upon the evaluation type, it affects the types of evaluation questions that you ask. So if you decide that you're interested in learning about your process or your implementation, then the type of evaluation questions you might ask is the program being delivered as intended to the target recipients? Is the program well managed? What progress has been made in implementing new provisions? And so all of those questions tie into process or implementation evaluation. Outcome evaluation presents a different sets of questions. It's are desired program outcomes being obtained? What role, if any, did the program play in actually achieving those outcomes? And did the program produce any unintended outcomes? And so lastly, for impact evaluation, you may look at types of questions that say, did the program cause the desired impact? Is one approach more effective than the other in obtaining the desired outcomes? And so you can see how the types of questions that you are interested in asking or learning about shapes the type of evaluation that you would conduct. All right, so we're here with our next set of polls. So the first, Kanawha Valley parents has decided to conduct an impact evaluation. What evaluation questions should they use to guide their evaluation? So the options that you have are, remember, we're looking for impact evaluation. How did the participants' behaviors change as a result of the program? Are we executing the program as intended? Did the program cause the desired outcomes? So that's for the impact evaluation. For the second question, we are going to look at West Virginia Arts Festival, and they want to conduct an outcome evaluation. So what evaluation questions should they ask, use it to guide their evaluation? So were there changes in participant skills, attitudes, and knowledge? What role did the program have in the observed changes? And which program services were most effective in generating the change? So Erin, could you start the first poll? All right. And so I'll give you the answer choices again because it's too long to put on word. So A would be, how did participants' behaviors change as a result of the program? B would be, are we executing the program as intended? C would be, did the program cause the desired outcomes? And remember, we're looking for an impact evaluation. All right, Erin, can you put up the second poll? All right, and so remember, for this program, we are looking to conduct an outcome evaluation for West Virginia. I see Erin has also put the questions, the answer responses in the chat. So A would be, were there changes in participants' attitudes, knowledge, or skills? B would be, what role did the program have in observed changes? And then C would be, which program services were most effective in generating change? Remember, we're looking for an outcome evaluation. All right, Erin, can you go back to the presentation? Okay, so if we are looking at the first case with Kanawha Valley parents, and the three options that we have, for them to be conducting an impact evaluation, we would look at the answer to be C. Did the program cause the desired outcomes? A would be an outcome evaluation question, and then B would be a process evaluation. So you can see the difference in the types of questions based on the type of evaluation. Now, for West Virginia Arts, if we were to look at an outcome evaluation, which question would they use? We would go with A. What were there changes in participants' attitudes, knowledge, and skills? Answer B would be more of an impact evaluation. And then C would be more of a impact evaluation question as well. So you can definitely see the difference between the types of evaluation questions that you would ask based off of the type of evaluation that you want to conduct. All right, so the next thing that we're going to look at in our steps for program evaluation is, how do we identify and develop measures? So measures are data that will be used to determine if outcomes were met. Performance measures provide the data that you will use to measure your program results. Measures reveal what is occurring in your program, while program evaluation provides you with an overall assessment of whether or not your program is working. And so when we look at the different types of elements, they have different measures that you would use. So for instance, if you're looking at your resources and your inputs, these are measures of resources consumed by the organization. Some example measures that you would use for that element would be amount of funds, the number of full-time employees, materials, equipment, supplies, etc. If you are interested in understanding activities, which would measure of work performed that directly produces the core products and services, you would look at the number of training classes offered, or the number of performances, or the number of presentations. And so if we were looking for measures for outputs, we would look at the number of individuals served, the number of items provided, the number of people in attendance. And so If you're looking at measures for customers reach, so this would be what we call demographic information, you will look at the number of individuals by age, by race, by gender, social class, and geographic location. And then if we're looking to measure outcomes, that's where we come up with these measures about improved attitudes or knowledge or beliefs and awareness, or improved skills like increased GED attainment. So your elements have different types of measures that you would use in order to see what is occurring in your program. And then you use these measures as a part of your program evaluation. Okay, so our next Zoom poll, we're going to think about the types of measures that each of these organizations might use. So which answer below should not be included in a measure of Kanawha Valley parents' participation impact evaluation? So remember, we're looking at an impact evaluation. So we have the change in number of hours parents spent with children, the number of children who pass preschool assessment tests, the number of teachers in the program, and then a change in parent-child interaction. And then if we're looking at West Virginia Art, we're going to look at what types of measures should they include in the evaluation of their 6-week program, so their 6-week arts education program. Should they measure an increase in knowledge, number of classes completed by participants, changes in participant attitudes towards the arts, or all of the above? So Aaron, if you can go ahead and start those polls. Remember, we're doing an impact evaluation and we're looking for which one should not be included. All right, Aaron, if you can do the second poll. And remember, for the second poll, we're looking at what types of measures would they use in an outcome evaluation. All right, Aaron, we can go back to the presentation. Okay, so if we look at the answers that I've provided and trying to determine which should not be included as a measure for an impact evaluation, the answer for that would be C, which is a number of teachers in the program. Now, why would this not be a part of an impact evaluation? Because this is more of a process or implementation. Did we have enough teachers to implement the program to individuals, to our participants? So that's more about implementation and less about impact. The other ones would be very much associated with impact. Now, for the arts, West Virginia Arts Festival, when we are looking to do an outcome evaluation, the answer for this one would be all of the above, as all of these measures would give them information about their outcomes. So the next step we'll talk about is designing your evaluation. So there are many different types of evaluation design. Evaluation design is just the methodological approach you select to answer your evaluation questions. So you first start out with your objectives or your logic model, and then you move to thinking about what you're looking to evaluate. And now you're going to choose how you're going to evaluate. And there are many different types of evaluation designs, but we are only going to talk about the non-experimental type, as is the type that is most relevant to projects with TGKVF grantees. So non-experimental designs examine changes in outcomes for program participants, but they do not include a comparison group or of individuals or groups not exposed to the program. And so there are two ways in which you can conduct non-experimental designs. One is a one-shot design, and this is a measurement that takes place only at one specific time. Typically, it is a post-test following the intervention or the program. Then you also have the one group pre-test, post-test design. This is where measurement takes place prior to implementation or to participants receiving the program material, and then they take one after the intervention. And so you have one shot where we have one post-test after, and then you have pre-post-test design where it's one before and one after. And we'll talk about both in a little detail. All right, so if we're just thinking about these experiments for the two groups that we have, remember, Kanawha Valley Parents is doing an impact evaluation. They have a 16-week program that they are implementing to increase school readiness and parent-child interaction. Just from the slide before, we're going to ask, do you think that they should conduct a one-shot test or a pre and post test? And then what we do see for some programs is that they have two types of program implementation. For instance, West Virginia Arts, they have a 6-week program, and then they also have an arts festival in the park. So which non-experimental design would West Virginia Arts use in their outcome evaluation for their 6-week program? And then which non-experimental design would they use to evaluate their art in the park? So, Erin, could you start the polls? So remember, this is for their 16-week program, and their goal is to increase school readiness and parent and child interaction. And it looks like you all have this answer down packed with over 90% of you all choosing the correct answer. All right, Erin, can you do the second poll? All right, so remember that West Virginia Arts has a 6-week art education program that they are going to implement. All right, and then lastly, the last poll, Erin. Which non-experimental design should they use to evaluate their art in the park? All right, Erin, can you go back to the presentation? Thank you. So if we're looking at the Kanawha Valley Parents and their 16-week program, the best program design for them to use in their impact evaluation would be pre-test, post-test, because they will be delivering content to the same individuals, and they'll have them at the beginning of their program and at the end of the program, and they really want to see what the impact is of their program, and the best way to do that is with the pre and post test. As far as the West Virginia Arts program, for their 6-week program, much like with the first example for the Kanawha Valley parents, they would use a pre-post test. That would be the best non-experimental design to evaluate their 6-week program. Now, if we're looking at their Art in the Park Festival, the best way for them to evaluate that would be a one-shot. And it's mainly because it's a one-day event. People are there, and you want to see how participating in that event, what were their thoughts on that. So that particular one would be one shot. And so you can see how one project may have 2 different types of program design depending upon the types of projects or programs that they have to offer. All right, so now we've talked about developing evaluation questions, identifying measures, designing the evaluation. Here's what everyone wants to know. How do we collect the data? When you're collecting data, the main thing you want to do is only collect what you need to know. Depending upon the size of your project or your program, you can collect a lot of information, and you want to make sure that the information that you're collecting is actually valuable to what you are looking to do with your evaluation. So make sure that every piece of data that you collect will help you answer one of your evaluation questions. As data leads to understanding, and then that understanding leads to action, whether the action is learning how to improve your program or learning about the impact of your program. But you want to make sure that the data that you collect is the data that you want. So there are 2 different types of data that you can collect, and the different types of data tells us different things. So you can have quantitative data or qualitative data. And so on this slide, you can see we list what the goal is. So what your goal is determines your research question. And then that in turn determines the type of data that you collect. And then the type of data that you collect determines how you analyze that data. So quantitative data is data that discovers facts, explanation, or causation. And so the types of questions for quantitative data would be what, when, where, and who questions. And a lot of the time with quantitative data, we have a large number of people in our target population or in our sample. And this data is measurable, so it's gathered via surveys or secondary data, and you use statistical analysis in order to analyze that, statistical methods in order to analyze that data. While qualitative data you use when your goal is to learn what people are doing and why they are doing it from the perspective of the participants. So it focuses on what meaning these actions have for the participants. And so the research questions that qualitative data looks to answer is how and why questions, more explanatory. Because it is from the perspective of the participants, it is usually smaller sample groups of people. And the data is in words or behaviors or visual, and it's collected through participant observations or interviews to enhance understanding. And then the way that we analyze qualitative data is that we look for themes within the data, or we categorize the data into patterns so that we're able to see if reoccurring things come up within your target population. So this particular slide looks at data collection methods, their purpose, their advantages, their challenges, and then the types of data that comes from them. And so I won't go over everything in this slide word for word, but we'll talk about a few. So for instance, surveys and questionnaires, their purpose is to quickly and easily get lots of information from people in a non-threatening way. And there are some advantages and challenges to each of these methods of collecting data. And then the type of data that you collect from surveys or questionnaires can be both quantitative or qualitative, depending upon the type of question that you ask. And so we'll talk about question type and give a little bit more clarification on that on the slides to follow. Interviews are very similar in the types of data that you can collect from surveys. Focus groups are for when you have smaller sample sizes and you're able to have in-depth, thorough group discussion about reactions to experiences and understandings. And then direct observations are also qualitative ways of collecting data. So when you're planning for data collection, there are some things that you want to consider because then this will affect the way in which you implement your data collection processes. So what is the data source? Where am I getting my data from? Am I getting from people who participate in the program? Am I getting it from existing records or reports? And then what type of data would I like to collect? Am I interested in learning about things that can be quantified, or am I interested in learning about my participants' perspectives on certain things? And then how you collect the data. So there are different types of data collection tools. You can use surveys, which we talked about in the previous slide. Surveys, interviews, focus groups, direct observations. One of the things that you want to consider is how will the data collection tools be administered? So will I need to get additional volunteers to give out surveys? Will I need to maybe have some review with my facilitators on how to conduct focus groups and things of that sort? And then, that's who will collect the data. So you want to make sure that the individuals who are collecting the data are trained on data collection. And then you also want to think about, where will I store all of this information? How will I enter this information so that it is electronic? So who's going to be doing data entry and things of that sort? So these are all things that you want to consider when you're planning for your data collection, so that there's no surprises when you actually are going out to collect the data. All right, so when you're collecting data using surveys, remember we have those two types of designs. You can have a post-survey one-shot design, and then pre and post surveys for measuring changes over time. So in your one-shot design, your participants are studied at a single point in time after project participation to measure if the project caused change. So did the individuals who participated in, for our example, the West Virginia Festival, that one festival, did they feel like they left knowing more about art than before they came? So you want to kind of measure that type change. That would be one shot. A pre and post measure changes over time. So this tracks changes in participant attitudes, opinions, behaviors, and knowledge. You want to make sure that when you're doing pre and post surveys, that you are using the same question wording so that you can pinpoint the changes. You want to make sure that you're surveying the same participants in the pre-test and the post-test, so that you can compare their changes. And then you will also need to match pre-test and post-test to measure change. So you want to make sure that your participants have some type of identifier. It could be their name, it could be their initials, it could be participant 1, participant 2, participant 3, but you want to make sure that that stays consistent with both the pre and the post, so that you can match them at the end to analyze and see the changes that occurred because of them participating in your program. All right, so when you're collecting data, there are different types of questions. You can have closed-ended questions. And these are questions that include yes or no answers and any question with one definite right answer. So you can have multiple choice. This is where participants choose one answer from a number of alternatives. And so there are different ways in which you can structure multiple choice questions. You can have single answer, and this is where respondents can only choose one answer. This is where you have multiple answer, or one with multiple answers, where respondents can choose more than one answer. So they're able to choose multiple from the answer choices. You have rating scales where respondents can rate questions from like 0 to 10. And then you have Likert scales. Likert scales involve presenting people with several statements, including both favorable and unfavorable statements, and then respondents then express their agreement or disagreement with each of the statement on the scale. And then you also have drop-down questions where they're able to choose their answers from a drop-down. Now, another type of question, those were all the types of closed-ended questions. Another type of question would be an open-ended question. An open-ended question is a question that cannot be answered with a simple yes or no, and instead it requires the participant to elaborate on their points. So this will give you that qualitative data that gives you insight from the participants. And on your surveys, you can have both qualitative and quantitative data. So I can ask some closed-ended questions to get yes or no so that I can have some statistical averages. But then if I want to know more information as to why participants may have said yes or no, then I may add an open-ended question so that they have an opportunity to give their perspective or their insight on the questions that you asked. So when I'm collecting data, there are different question categories. And so my question category will give me a different type of question. So for instance, if I'm looking to measure knowledge, I would use a multiple choice question that gives them the opportunity to choose the right answer. And then that way I'll know if they actually have the knowledge about whatever the subject is. So for instance, an example of that would be, which is not a component of SMART goals. So the answer in which they choose on this question lets me know whether or not the participants are knowledgeable about SMART goals. If I'm measuring attitudes or beliefs, I'll probably use a Likert scale. And the Likert scale helps me to understand where their attitude or belief may fall on a favorable to non-favorable scale. So for instance, the arts help me to better understand other cultures. Do you strongly agree, disagree? Are you undecided? Are you agree? Or you strongly agree? And so that would be a Likert question that could be used to measure attitudes or beliefs. And then when I'm measuring behavior, I could use open-ended Likert or multiple choice questions. So how many times per week do you use tobacco? Then I give them the options to report their behavior with that type of question. So you can see that your question category forces you to use a different type of survey question, and then there's some examples of those. So if you are interested in learning how to create online surveys to collect data, there are some online survey tools that you can use. SurveyMonkey is one. eSurvey, Zoomerang, Google Forms, Survey Gizmo, and Survey Planet. All of these are resources that you can use to create surveys so that you can collect data online. And then some of them also have like analytic tools that go along with their surveys so that they'll collect the data and then they could generate different types of graphs and charts for you based off of the data that was collected. So if we're looking at collecting data, I know there are some difficulties that different types of programs or projects experience in collecting their data. And so for outdoor events and festivals, sometimes it can be a little difficult in order to collect data from individuals. So some ideas about collecting data on outdoor events or festivals is that you can collect data through ticket sales or registration. You can have an event page with links to registration or survey tools that you can tell participants to visit. You can have volunteers can collect post-survey data in real time, whether they have paper surveys that they give out to individuals and then collect back, or whether you use technology like iPads or things of that sort, and participants can do this survey in digital form in real time. You can also have volunteers collect email addresses. Sometimes it's not easy to have individuals stop and do a survey at that moment. So maybe you can collect email addresses and send out post surveys after the event. Or you can have posters of QR codes at entrances and exits so that participants can use their cell phones to complete post surveys. I know a lot of the survey creation tools that I mentioned in the last slide offer the creation of QR codes to go along with their survey links. And so you can allow participants to use their cell phones to do that. And then you also have check-in apps where individuals can check in at your location. And then you can also attach some questions to that to gather information if you would like. Some ways of estimating during the event. So if we're interested in knowing how many people participated or came to your program, you can have clickers, and clickers have counters on each entrance point. Now this is if you have dedicated entrance and exit points. So clickers are pros, they're easy to administer. But con is that they're only suitable if you have defined entrance and exit points. If people can enter and exit at multiple points, then the clickers wouldn't necessarily be accurate because you could have people double counting individuals. Another creative idea is stickers. So you may have stickers that can be used for marketing purposes. You can hand a sticker to each person as they're entering your event. And then at the end of the day, you can see how many stickers remain. Some pros is that it's easy to administer. It could be fun for the audience. You can have some brand recognition that enhance event identity. But once again, like clickers, it's only suitable if you have defined entrance points. Exit count is self-explanatory, and again the con to that is if you have designed exit points. And then another example, if you have a seated event, whether it's indoor or outdoor, and you're looking for ways to estimate how many people have participated, if there's a set amount of seating, you can pick 4 or 5 random sections and then count the number of people in those sections and use that as a field percentage to get an average of all the sections, and then you can have a representative sample of seats filled at your event. So those are just some creative ways to collect data during your events. All right, so for this poll, we are going to talk about or see if you can kind of outline the process for pre and post data collection. So West Virginia Arts has decided to give their pre and post test to participants in their 6-week program. Please select the correct order of pre and post survey results. So I'm going to leave this part up so that you all can determine your order, and then we'll put the poll in so you can choose A, B, or C, A, B, C, or D. I'll give you a couple of minutes to look at the order and then think about what order do you think would be the order it should be implemented for pre and post testing. All right, Aaron, can you put up the poll? All right, can you go back to the presentation? So the correct answer would be C. And I want to talk about this process so that we can make sure that you all understand. The first step to pre and post survey data collection is to develop a survey that will be administered with a unique identifier for each participant. And then after that, you give the pre-survey. After the pre-survey, you deliver the program content. The pre-survey is to see what do the participants know, or what are their attitudes or behaviors before receiving program content. So that's why you want to give the pre-survey before you actually deliver program content. Then after you deliver program content, you want to give the post-survey. And then you want to match your pre and post surveys by the unique identifiers. And then the last step would be to analyze the changes in pre and post survey data. So that would be the correct order of pre and post survey implementation. All right, so we've talked about developing evaluation questions, identifying measures, designing the evaluation, some creative ways to collect data. How do we collect data? The types of data that we'll collect. And now we're going to look at how do we analyze and interpret the data. So for beginner evaluators who are using paper data collection tools, inputting the data should be kept extremely relatively simple. And you can just use an Excel spreadsheet, and that could be used for collecting both quantitative and qualitative data. So for instance, if you look at the picture on the screen, you can see participant 1, and then question 1 might have had a satisfaction rating of 0 to 5, and so you want to actually input what their ranking was, and then you can use an Excel spreadsheet to kind of track each question and the answers that the participants gave for the questions. Now, online survey data can be exported into Excel, and some online surveys, which we talked about before, will perform some simple statistical analysis for you. One of the positives of having online survey data collection is that it eliminates the need for data entry, which eliminates some human error that can occur. If you have 300 surveys and someone is manually entering them into Excel, you're more likely to have a mistake happen than if you have individuals who clicked on a link and took a survey themselves and it was uploaded by the online data collection tool. So data analysis allows you to see what your data is telling you, and it can identify changes that have happened as a result of your service. It lets you know what is working really well that you should do more of and what you might want to improve on. So when you're analyzing quantitative data, you can cover simple methods of placing it into a spreadsheet or tracking and look for patterns or changes. And then the results or findings for quantitative information can look like changes in percentages or volume of use or a mapping of service or access points. When we're looking at qualitative data, you want to understand that you have to read carefully through your data systematically to look for those themes that you can group data in. And then if you did focus groups, you may have to transcribe the responses from focus groups and then look at the answers from each question discussed in the group. And then you can look for repeated items or themes that were in that data and then use that as for your analysis. When we are using quantitative data, we use descriptive statistics, and these statistics are meant to give bigger picture, to give a bigger picture to your questions that you have. So you have mean, median, mode, and range. So your mean implies the average. The mode looks at the most popular option. The median looks for the middle number, so where you would arrange everything, all of the data points and then you will look for the middle number. So it kind of tells you if your average is skewed because you have some people who have high scores and some people who have low scores, you use your median to along with your mean to kind of get an idea of where the middle really is. And then your range tells the difference between your highest and your lowest scores. So for instance, if we're analyzing some quantitative data, and the question that we have for individuals is, do you plan on attending this conference next year? You can calculate a simple frequencies and percentages to paint a broad picture of your data. So the percentages are just that. It's the percent of people who gave a particular answer. So for instance, if we're looking at the answer choices here, we can see that 71% of participants agreed that they would plan on attending the conference next year. So you can use these statistics to see how receptive individuals were to the program or the project that you implemented. When you're analyzing qualitative data, like we said before, you want to look for common or reoccurring patterns or themes or ideas or words or phrases. You want to establish your categories based off of those themes, and then you want to code the data to match those themes so that you can see how many people actually mentioned or said or talked about the specific themes that you have. This brings order to the data. And it determines, you can use this qualitative data to support the quantitative data that you have in your evaluation, or it could be used standalone as well. So some online data analysis software that's free. The ones that require the least amount of experience, I would think, would be SurveyMonkey and SurveyGizmo. The other few, like R and SPSS, they may require a little more experience in dealing with statistical data. So if you have someone on your team who's a little more experienced, then they may want to use some of the paid programs. If you're new to this, and you don't have that much experience, then you may want to go with this, like SurveyMonkeys and SurveyGizmos. All right, so we're going to take some time to actually look at how we interpret pre and post data. So if we look at the screen, you can see that the Kanawha Valley parents developed the following measurable objective for their impact evaluation. Their objective was there will be a 10% increase in the number of parents who spend 3 or more hours with their children. To the right, you'll see the table for their results from their pre and their post test, with the pre-test being at the top, the post-test being at the bottom. And so I want you to look at this information and see, did they meet their objective of a 10% increase in the number of parents who spend 3 or more hours with their children? Aaron, can you put up the poll? And if you're not sure, that's okay. I'm going to explain it. All right, can you go back to the example? Thank you. Okay, so if we look at the data, we can see that the sum of, so the objective is to look at parents who spend 3 or more hours with their children. So we would look at categories that have 3 to 4 hours, 5 to 6 hours, and 7+ hours, because that would be 3 or more. If we look at the pre-test, you can see that the sum of the percentage of individuals who chose 3 or more categories, 3 or more hour categories, would be 84%, right? So that's 55 plus 20 plus 9%. For the post-test, if we look at those same categories, you have 64% plus 22% plus 9%, which would be 95%. Individuals, 95% of participants chose on their post survey that they spent 3 or more hours with their children. And so therefore, 84%, 95% minus 84% is 11%. So the answer to that question would be yes. They did reach their objective of having 10%, a 10% increase in the number of parents who spend more than 3 or more hours with their children. The next one. So Kanawha Valley parents developed the following measurable objective for their impact evaluation. There will be a 20% increase in the number of participants who will experience a positive shift in their interactions with their children. So here is the data from their pre and their post test. And they're looking for a 20% increase in the number of participants who will experience a positive shift in the interactions with their children. Aaron, can you put up the poll? All right, can you go back to the presentation? Okay, so if we look at the pre and post data, we can see that the disagree categories, so that would be strongly disagree and somewhat disagree, total 64% in their pre, and then they total 40% in their post. Now, this may give you the idea that, wow, they had a 20% decrease in the disagree individuals, but that is not what we are looking to evaluate. We're looking to evaluate the increase, right? So while we see that there was a decrease of 24 points in the disagree or the negative categories, when we look at the agree categories, we see that the somewhat agree and strongly agree category was 27% on the pre, and then the somewhat agree and strongly agree categories were 36 on the post. So then the answer would be no, they did not meet their objective because there was only a 9-point increase in the number of participants in the agree categories. There was a 15-point increase in the neither agree or disagree category, but that cannot be counted as a positive shift because it's a neutral category. So you can see how you want to make sure that you are actually looking at the data based off of the question that you are asking. Because had they said that we wanted to have a 20% decrease in the disagree categories, then they might have met their objective. But if we're looking at the agree categories, then they missed their objective. And then the last kind of application that we have is the West Virginia Arts developed the following measurable objective for their impact evaluation. So this would be their one-shot evaluation of people who participated in the Arts Festival. And so their objective would be that 75% of those surveyed will agree that participating in the event increased their knowledge about the arts. So here's the data results from their first post survey. And we want to see, did they meet their objective of 75% of participants who were surveyed will agree that they had an increase in their knowledge about the arts. Aaron, can you bring up the poll? All right, can you go back to the, thank you. So if we look at the post-survey data, we can see that the somewhat agree and agree categories total to 72%. So almost, but the answer would be no. They did not meet their objective. So hopefully these 3 examples let you see how the data could be input into an Excel spreadsheet and how we could use percentages in order to answer the evaluation questions that you may have about projects. What I did want to make sure that you all were aware of is that sometimes it's okay to outsource. So an alternative to performing evaluations internally is that you can outsource this responsibility. So you can look for contacts and local colleges who have graduate students who may be interested in doing some statistical analysis work so that they can have some real world experience. You can hire outside consultants for projects as needed, or you can offer internship experience for students who are in college as well, so that you can have someone who may have a little more knowledge about evaluation and statistical analysis help you in performing your evaluations. That concludes our evaluation 101 training. If you have any questions, we have about 18 minutes or so. Well, we can open it up for questions. You can use the comment box if you have any questions that you would like for me to answer. My contact information is also there. So if you have any specific questions about evaluating your project, if you need some further assistance, please feel free to email me, send me your evaluation tools. I'll give you some feedback on them. Also, if you look in the comment box, there is a evaluation of the evaluation training, right? So there's a survey that we would like for you to take to give us feedback on this webinar. We will also email that out to all the participants if you don't have the opportunity to click on it now and take it. Are there any questions?
So CJ, we've gotten a couple questions about the PowerPoint slides being downloaded and given out to participants. I was wondering if any of the Greater Kanawha Valley staff have any answers for that.
Sure. Hey, Aaron, this is Stephanie. We will upload the slides on TGKVF's website at tgkvf.org. And coming soon, we will have a evaluation resource library, which will include a lot of the materials Midwest has prepared for us. In the meantime, if you look at our events page, we have all of our webinars listed there, and we'll have copies of the PowerPoint slides there.
Aaron, were there any more questions?
Yes, so we have one that says, is there an online training program for exporting Excel data to Access?
That I do not have the answer for. But if whoever has that question would email me, I will look it up and find out for them. Well, that looks like all of the questions that I see. Erin, did you see any more?
Nope, I don't think we see any that haven't been answered.
Yep. All right, well, thank you all so much for taking your time out to participate in this webinar. I hope that you were provided with some information that could assist you in evaluating your programs. And now I will turn it back over to TGKVF.
TJ and Erin, thank you so much for leading us through this webinar and giving both TGKVF staff and also all of our grantee partners and nonprofit community partners some ideas on how to measure the impact of the amazing programs they run. We appreciate your partnership, and thanks to everyone who joined in today. And we'll be back in touch with more capacity building training soon. Thank you all. Have a great day.